Welcome everybody to another month of mentoring. I just love these evenings. I've just spent the last couple hours going over the notes that Spirit has given me since the last time we got together, and just never ceases to amaze me how much they find to share. So I know we always have some folks who have never attended these sessions before, and welcome. You should start to feel the energy already if you haven't. I've been sitting here for the last 10 minutes, and Bev, I don't know, did you hear that great big woo from here? Did you hear it?
I did.
Yeah, I thought it was muted, and I was listening to some music and building the power, and all of a sudden let out this woo, and then I looked down and we weren't muted. So anyway, so once again, Ty and I are still on the road. We'll be home in just a few weeks back in South Carolina, but tonight we are in Banner Elk, North Carolina, in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. And I have such gratitude to our dear friends Gail and Bill Hancock, because we're visiting them and using their beautiful condo here with fast internet, which is such a gift when one is camping. So I know we're guaranteed to have a good evening technologically. So welcome again. We are recording this. That's good. And I want to thank Bev for the pre-game show. And how this evening will go is like every other one for the past 2 years. I'm going to start out by sharing some of the most recent evidence from those in the spirit world, from my readings, from my interactions across the veil. And there's a big reason that we do that, because all of the teaching that follows depends upon us knowing and understanding that we are part of something so much more, that there is so much more than this earthly physical realm. And so the evidence that comes through shows us that there is a greater reality, that we are not just these human beings in bodies. We are also souls, or this connection wouldn't be possible. And I doubt there's anybody joining us tonight that isn't aware of the chaotic energy that we're all embroiled in right now. There's so much divisiveness in our world, and you know, if we let ourselves focus only on our human stories, it's very easy to become discouraged. But when you spend time each day in the higher energy of the soul, becoming aware of who we are as pure expressions of the light, then these dissonant feelings that arise when we focus on the story feel so different relative to the joy of knowing we are this awareness, this pure being, that we become aware of it instantly, and we shift our focus from the story to the higher realms, and then we find the peace right away. So that's why we shared it. The biggest tool we have is knowing who and what we are. And I'm going to show you a great analogy later on this evening that shows another way of picturing how we can have two aspects of us at once. One of the phrases that helps me so much, and why I share the evidence for the first half hour every one of these sessions, is a phrase that my guide Sanaya gave me. And it's, what do you do when the world gets you down? You realize this is not the only world, and that awareness makes all the difference in the world. I remember, and most of you probably too, when we didn't know that there was anything besides this physical world. We forgot what we knew as babies coming into this world, that we're part of something greater. And when you don't know there's something else, and that you can shift your focus just like that and be the peace that's already here, well, then you suffer. So hopefully a lot of the tools that I'll be sharing this evening help you to find that place and suffer far less. All righty. So I love to start these sessions with an invocation. Bring us all together. We have more than a couple hundred people gathered already from around the world. So let's join our hearts right now. Let's take a deep breath and just acknowledge why we've gathered here together. So exhale nice and slow and feel the relaxation just slipping in as we do that. Settle in for a couple hours of a love bath here That love surrounds us, flows through us, is us. May we all come to know this awareness that is always present, that is who and what we are. May we come to know that we can access this place of love at any time. But for this time together this evening, we just give so much gratitude to ourselves for following the nudge to be here, sending it outward to all the others joined here like rays from one sun, joining together in gratitude for what we'll hear this evening. Each of us may hear something different, but may it be exactly what we need so that when we leave here this evening, we're enlightened, our consciousness is raised, and we radiate outward that higher vibration to help those around us. With so much gratitude, we'll begin. All right, great. Super. So let's start with some of the evidence. Gosh, always so good. I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago, maybe just 1 week ago, to gather with 3 other mediums and spend a good deal of time with them. And I don't get to do that too often. And it was so much fun, even though we all do readings regularly, to share the excitement, to share our wows, to share our joy at connecting with people that other people think are dead and gone, and to know that they're not. And so even though we do this all the time, it was just wonderful to be with mediums who haven't lost the awe. And so let me just share some of those, like I said. Let's see, maybe about a month and a half ago, I did a reading for a mother who is a member of Helping Parents Heal. She has a child across the veil. And I didn't realize when I started the reading, she's one of the chapter affiliate leaders for Helping Parents Heal in her area. Her daughter Grace came through so beautifully from across the veil. And one of the things that I always ask those in the spirit world to share is current events going on in the family's life now. That shows that they're still part of our life. I want you all to know in your hearts that your loved ones who pass know because they want to be with you and they are very interested in your lives. So it's just a joy when they share things, but especially things that the sitter, the client, doesn't know, or things that haven't happened yet. So this daughter, Grace, showed me that her stepfather, my client's husband, had a heart issue. In fact, she said it specifically, it was AFib. And Mom confirmed this. And I said, yes, but Grace is bringing up the fact that he needs an adjustment, that there's something going on there and there's going to be an adjustment. She said, I don't know anything about that. Well, this woman had been on my waiting list for a reading for 3 years. And I suddenly knew that that delay in waiting for the reading was actually a blessing, because this adjustment was something they needed to know about. Now, probably the doctors would have found it anyway, but it turns out that after the reading, he went and had a physical and saw a specialist and was booked for surgery to adjust his heart, and he had his medication adjusted. So I thought it was really cool that her daughter in spirit knew that, and they had a little bit of time to prepare mentally for that. And again, these things always show us that this is not telepathy. It's not the medium picking up information from the sitter's field. This is the spirit world that has the bigger picture and can often see what's wrong with us physically. In that same reading, she talked about her biological dad, the daughter did, from across the veil. She showed me a picture of her with a horse, and indeed, she had had horses, or at least there was a photo of her with a horse. Her mom remembered that. She also showed me her biological father having dental issues, and problems with his teeth. Mom didn't know anything about that because she hadn't been in touch with him. But she went on Facebook after the reading, and either that day or the next day, the young woman's biological father posted a photo of her with her arms around a horse's neck. And the next week, Dad had a wisdom tooth removed. So how cool is that? Again, you can't know these things from this level, but she saw it coming. All righty. Let's see. I received a beautiful request for a reading from a man who was so concerned about his wife. He said that her son, so his stepson, had passed 2 years earlier, and she wasn't sleeping, she wasn't eating well, she just could not get past her grief, and he wanted so badly to help her. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing for him to be so concerned that he wrote me a letter. I made sure that she was on board, because those of you who are practicing mediums will understand, and if you don't know this, it's a really good thing to know. If your sitter is very skeptical, that puts up an energetic wall and doesn't always lead to the best connection. Many well-intentioned people will ask for readings for someone else because they know it will be helpful. But if that person isn't open to it, you could have a bad result and then just prove what they already think is going to happen, which is nothing. So I asked this man, is your wife open to this? And he said, oh yes, she's read all your books. And that's not a prerequisite for a reading, but at least it showed me that she was open to it. So I did the reading, and her son came through so beautifully. And there are certain bits of evidence I always ask those in the spirit world to share right away. And he showed me how he passed. He let me feel his personality. And Mom had no idea, no doubt that that was him. So well into the reading, she was pretty stoic, I would say, probably trying not to cry. I was the one that was getting all excited about the evidence, but all of a sudden I said, he's showing me a little domino, a domino. And Mom went, oh, like that. She threw back her head, and her face lighted up with this huge smile. And I said, don't tell me anything, wait a minute. And I tried to feel into it. And I said, he doesn't feel like he's talking about board games. And she said, no, please, let me tell you. And I said, well, tell me later. I want to move on and stay with the flow. So for those of you who are practicing mediums, that's always a good idea to just let the spirit keep talking. But at the end of the reading, she told me that his dad owned a Domino's franchise. And he had been a manager at Domino's, and he loved that job. And in fact, he didn't have many belongings when he passed, but one of them was an 18-wheeler toy truck with the Domino's logo on the side. So how brilliant of that son to show a domino, to let his mom know this thing that was so important in his life, that showed this was really him. So just beautiful. A nice teaching point for those of you connecting across the veil. This is why I state and teach my students to state objectively exactly what the spirits are showing you. If I had seen the domino and not reported that, but tried to feel into it and said, well, I believe he's trying to show me that he played board games, Mom might have said no. And you get a no and you think you're wrong. So I report exactly, and really recommend you all do this. He is showing me a domino. And then even if we interpret it incorrectly, Mom knew what that meant. All right. I often talk about how those in spirit set us up for success. They often have a lot to do with what medium you choose. You are led to them by your loved ones. Those in the spirit world will often set up readings. They know they're going to happen and when they're going to happen. And they'll often use things in the medium's conscious awareness, things that just happen to the medium, because it's real easy to just pull them out of the current energy field, the thought field. So just earlier this week, Bev sent me an email and she said, Suzanne, I really recommend that you watch this video by Robin Williams, about Robin Williams. It's called Robin's Wish. Now, I can't tell you the last time Bev recommended that I watch any video. People are quite often sending me links for videos, and I simply don't have the time to watch them all, and we just don't watch TV at all. But for some reason, and there's always a reason, I felt compelled to watch the documentary. I rented it on Amazon Prime, watched the whole thing. And it was all about how they discovered that Robin Williams took his own life by hanging due to having advanced dementia, a kind of dementia called Lewy body syndrome, which I know from writing a book about Alzheimer's is very rapid, advanced, and always fatal. So I had just watched that, and the next day, just a couple days ago, did a reading for a woman. She was one of these that infrequently we will slip in when they just reach out to us because they're so desperate they can't function. And Lynette hadn't told me that. I didn't know. Lynette is my scheduling assistant. Things show up on my calendar. I go to my calendar. Oh, I'm doing a reading today for, let's call her Mary. So I get Mary on the screen like all of us are now, and tuned in right away. I had no idea who she wanted to hear from, but symbols are so helpful for all of us, no matter if you're a medium or talking to your own loved ones. They can communicate in symbols. And right away, I'm sensing a male presence. And he did this, ring on the finger. And I looked at her and I said, there's a man here and he's showing me ring on the finger. Notice how I report what I'm sensing. This feels like it's your husband. She said, yes, that's who I want to hear from today. And I tuned in, and you know, normally they tell me right up front how they passed, but I wasn't getting any symptoms. And so we went on with him showing me his personality, and she recognized him immediately. This was definitely her husband. And we got quite a ways into it, and suddenly I realized he hasn't shown me how he passed. And then I just knew that it was suicide. And I checked with him because I didn't want to report that unless that was accurate. And I said to her, this is suicide, because I knew it. I could just tell. And she started crying, and she said, yes, that's why I was so desperate to know that he's okay. And it was so clear from the personality he was showing that he was quite okay. And then this man said to me, like Robin Williams, same way, same thing. I wasn't in my right mind. And I said to the woman exactly what I'd heard from her husband, reported objectively. And then I said, so what he's telling me is that your husband hung himself, but it was because he was dealing with some biological challenges in his mind that you probably weren't even aware of, but that if you notice, his personality had changed over the past year. He had become more withdrawn, and all of this was accurate. So you see how if I hadn't watched that film the night before, if I hadn't followed that nudge, it's just very clear that that man across the veil truly needed his wife to know why he had taken his life. And in fact, she just was totally shocked that it had happened, didn't know that he was even close to suicide. So that was one of her biggest questions. Is he okay? And why? Why did he do it? And this was answered so easily because that spirit nudged Bev to write to me. I followed the nudge to watch the video, and it was right there. Now, could he have gotten that information through without me watching the video? Absolutely. But it was almost guaranteed because of the way that unfolded. So I hope you find that fascinating, and I hope that it helps those of you who are working on connecting across the veil to understand how the spirit world works. All right. Another bit of evidence, really cool. Doing a reading for a woman, and her husband was across the veil. He showed me a big black beetle. I mean, absolutely big black bug. I looked carefully, is it a spider? But he then quickly showed me something else, and I forgot about the beetle. I wasn't quite sure about it, so I didn't say it. Then a little bit later, he brought it up again, big beetle right in my face. And I'm trying to figure out, it felt like it was a current event because he's pointing at his wife. This had something to do with her. When they do that, that's what it had to do with. So I said, well, your husband's showing me this great big beetle. It has something to do with you, and it feels like a current event. And she started laughing, and she's on the screen just like I am now. And she goes, no, not a current event. And she leaned over like this, pointed behind her, and behind her on the wall, which had been completely blocked by her face, was a framed picture of the Beatles, who she was absolutely crazy about, and he knew it. She said, almost obsessed with them for decades. So that was just a beautiful piece of evidence that to me, the creativity of how spirit shows that. They just want us to say the word beetle, right? So you don't have to necessarily be shown a rock band and pin it down to the Beatles. This is why it's okay to let your sitters give you a little bit of feedback. It really raises the energy. We celebrate and move on. The higher the energy in the reading, the better. So then this gentleman, and this is to show you how discernment is so important for those of you who want to connect across the veil. I heard the husband say, carry water. And before I reported it, I said, huh? Silently, what are you talking about carrying water? And then he said, chop wood and carry water. I had just seen that phrase the day before in a book. Those of you who have studied anything about Zen Buddhism, it's a phrase that means even after enlightenment, what do? You still have to chop wood and carry water, meaning you still have to do your chores. You got to do your work. You got to go to work and do the dishes, whatever, even once you're enlightened. So I asked him, why are you showing me that? And he put his hands out and went, Om, which was really funny to see from a spirit in the spirit world. And then the message followed. So it's really great to get evidence, but the message was, I said, he's telling me he used to meditate a lot when he was here. She said, oh yes, for 30 years, and we meditated together. And I said, he's telling me that across the veil, one still chops wood and carries water if they so choose. In other words, you can carry on your very human activities. I've had some across the veil tell me that they like to golf when they get to the other side because they didn't get to relax enough while they were here. But this guy was showing me that because of the years of meditation, because of the preparation he did for his soul of making his consciousness as high as possible, he was no longer embodying the story. He wasn't chopping wood and carrying water anymore. He said he was now his wife's guide from a much higher level, and that he was embodying the story as her husband, coming back into the story, the role as her husband for the reading, just so she would know he will always be there to greet her. She will recognize him as the husband that who was together with her in this life, but that once she got to the other side, if she chose to join him, they would both be much higher up and wouldn't need to do their earthly things. So a very cool spiritual teaching about what happens across the veil. If you've read my free ebook, Awakening, it's available to anybody who signs up for my email list, and then you can unsubscribe if you don't want to be on my list, but it's right on my homepage at the bottom, Awakening. At the back of that is a download from my guides about what it's like across the veil. And it's different for everybody depending on your level of awakening and depending on what your soul wants to do. So it was clear that this gentleman had done his homework while he was here, done his work. The meditation was joy in his life, and he was carrying on at a higher level across the veil. Isn't that cool? I love it. All righty. So we can talk about these experiences of being the light and the experience of being a soul in a human body, but the goal is to have the personal experience. That's what I want for all of you. That's why I have free meditations on my website that I encourage you to try, or anybody's meditation. But ask Spirit for experiences of who you really are. I had the most amazing experience in the past month. Awakened at 3 in the morning, and I'm lying there trying to go back to sleep, and I couldn't. So I just started talking to Spirit, and it's a great thing to do. Instead of struggling, just surrender. Maybe there's a reason you can't sleep. And suddenly all awareness of Suzanne dissolved, and lying in the bed, I was a man. I can't tell you how I knew it at a human level. I just was a man, but with no story whatsoever. I was completely masculine. I didn't have a name. I just was given the experience of how it feels to be a man. And I quickly checked around. Am I awake or am I asleep? Is this a dream? I opened my eyes. I was fully awake, fully lucid, but still the man. And just as suddenly as that had come over me, I became an 8-year-old girl. And it wasn't little Susie at all. This was a generic 8-year-old girl looking through these eyes with no story, no fears, no memories, just what it feels like to be a little girl. And then the lesson that followed for all of us is we are all source, playing roles for source to have that experience. So source chose to be you, to express itself, to shine through you in this body, at this time, in your location, for the joy of it and for the challenges of it, knowing that source cannot be harmed at its very essence. So with that introduction, I promised in the email that we sent out about tonight that I would share with you a new way of understanding our oneness with each other, who and what we are. How can we be expressions of source? And if we all are, and there's only one source, that's the oneness. So I'm going to go through some slides that I put together because Spirit showed me this really cool way of understanding, another way of how the duality can fit in with the oneness, and there's no separation. So first of all, so many people say, why would Source want to take on these lives? Is it to learn more about itself? No, because if we arise from the sea of infinite potential, infinite intelligence, then this source, our source, who we are, already knows itself intimately, already is all that is, doesn't need to improve itself at the deepest level. I hope that makes sense. That's one of the things that used to puzzle me when people say, oh, we came into life so that source could improve itself. Why would it need to? So I'm going to share this first slide with you, and this is just really fascinating here. Oops, I don't want you to see that yet. Let's go to the top. We'll talk about that one later. We'll go right here and bring this up. There we go. So source does want to know an aspect of itself, but we're going to call source awareness. But it doesn't have to become, to create anything, to arise as anything. It doesn't have to do anything. What if source simply wants to know something other than being itself? What if this sea of infinite intelligence and infinite creativity wants to know the experience of being limited, which is the complete opposite of what it is? And so we arise from this sea of pure awareness. We could call it pure consciousness. Some people call it the absolute. Why did I put this on a computer screen? Because this is the analogy that Spirit told me to share with you. Imagine this screen of the computer is that sea of pure potential. You might have heard of the sea of consciousness being like an ocean, and we are the waves that arise. That's a beautiful analogy, one we hear a lot, because you can't separate the wave from the ocean. Well, what is it that we can't separate from a screen that is completely self-aware, right? If this computer screen already holds the potential to be anything, already knows all that is, and is completely aware of what it is, well then anything that is limited that pops up, the analogy that was shown to me are like windows on the screen, right? You know, like Windows 10. So each of us is, our stories represents a window that pops up on the screen. The point here is you can't separate this limited expression of creativity that shows up on the screen of consciousness from consciousness itself. You can't have the window without the screen, and so they're not separate. Alrighty, so again, source perhaps wanted to know itself as something other than its nature, for the experience of it, for the joy of it, perhaps, for the creativity of it, for the sheer creativity. And so suddenly up pops objects, we'll call them windows. And over time, through evolution within the different windows, What was just pure matter takes on the aspects of the source, and they are also self-aware and creative and conscious and have thoughts, right? These bubble up within the windows. And before you know it, we have sentient beings. So the windows themselves are now telling stories, limited stories that can actually interact with each other. They pop up just like windows on our screen. And here you see a couple of stories. There's the Suzanne story, and that, for those of you who know my husband, that's the Thai story. I put them each in individual windows, right? And the cool thing about windows on a computer is you get to move them around, right? You can drag them around the story, around the screen. What helps me in my readings, and I hope it will help you who are practicing mediums, is to realize that if we're all connected beneath the story by the screen itself, by pure consciousness, and we are individual windows or stories, then simply by setting the intention to connect with other stories. So I'm the medium, I want to connect with somebody's loved ones across the veil. Those loved ones are also windows on the screen of consciousness, all arising from the same source. Because we're all connected, that's why it's so easy to connect. Intention is what brings us together. So just like you can drag windows around a screen, you can, in a reading, say, let's merge our stories. Let's overlay the windows. And that's what happens in a reading. I want to connect with someone. We simply overlay our windows, and all the information is right in our conscious awareness. Understand that because all of the information in all of our roles is part of the screen, it's all available to us at any time. That's the holographic nature of reality. But by setting the intention to connect with a specific loved one across the veil, even if you're not a medium, those of you who want to connect with loved ones who have passed, what you're doing is simply merging two stories. And this is what happens with couples so often, right? We have shared experiences of awareness because at our deepest level, we are already one. We are the screen projecting our stories. That's the coolest message of all. We're all always and already whole, because our deepest essence is that completeness, that unlimited aspect of pure consciousness, which is our true nature. I hope that that's, oops, stop the screen share. There we go. I hope you enjoyed that. These are metaphors, and it's a little hard to wrap your head around. I do my best to make it understandable. But the practical aspect of that is just understanding that beyond the metaphors, our belief that we're part of something limitless and self-aware and creative, intelligent and sentient. Because we're part of that, we arise from that, setting the intention to connect with any aspect of this field of infinite intelligence causes that connection to happen. And that's why we share a lot of the evidence. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. We've gone half an hour without doing any Q&As. So Bev, why don't we do a couple of those, huh? Take some questions from people.
Okay. Susan asks, is Reiki real? If a person receives an attunement and now has increased ability to transmit universal healing energy through the hands, is this real?
It is absolutely real. And there are many, many people who have experienced Reiki, who do Reiki, and have experienced the healing that comes from it. You know, and actually the greatest part of that is the belief, because what we're tapping into is this universal field of energy. And at the deepest level, that contains pure balance, total health, all goodness. So what a Reiki healer or any hands-on healer or hands-off healer is doing is tapping into that field and channeling that energy through intention. So it's very real. But it's very interesting also that it's quite important for the recipient to believe it's real, because if you don't believe, your own energy field sets up an energetic barrier, and it's much harder for the healer to get that healing, balancing energy to take effect.
Okay, thank you. This is anonymous. I used to be in a Christian ministry and we used to speak in tongues. It felt pretty authentic. What is it, and is it real? What does it do?
I love that. My lip just twitched. This is the team saying, we've got this. So what's happening is that those who begin spontaneously speaking in tongues, I've never answered this, but I'm getting it now, have shifted their normal waking consciousness beyond the confines of the window, right? They've stepped outside the window. They're tapping into a different state of consciousness, a different vibration than normal, from which anything is possible. And so having loosened the belief system and the bonds of what is possible, they tap into the infinite field and a new experience arises. That was the first part of the question. What was the second part, Bev?
No, that was it. What is it?
Yeah. And again, it shows that we're part of something greater, that we are limitless, and that it does require getting outside of the box to have these kinds of experiences. Sometimes they happen spontaneously, and then you've opened the door. This is another benefit to sharing stories like this, is once we know what's possible, then it opens the door for us to have those experiences as well. All right, I'll move on and we'll answer more questions like that as we go along. All righty, let's see. Oh, a quick question I'm often asked by students of mediumship is, what do you do when you have several spirits show up at the same time? How do you tell them apart? It reminds me of the movie Ghost, and Whoopi Goldberg is the psychic, and the whole family in the spirit world's hanging out behind her, and I want to go first. No, I want to go first. And she's trying to sort them all out. Well, first of all, you set the intention that they will sort themselves out, and that your mediumship guide will help as well, and only let one come in at a time. But I was doing a reading just this past week, and I had a woman who had 2 daughters across the veil. I told her I'm sensing a loved one, and she said, well, I actually have 2. And she didn't tell me what gender they were, and I tuned in and I said, these are both daughters. She said, yes. And now here's an excellent way to handle that. I simply said to the girls, look, the most important way for me to get to know you is to feel your personality, because even sisters will always have something that's different. So I asked them to step apart energetically. Okay, I don't see them, so I can't describe one here or one there, but I literally asked one of them to stand apart from the other one. It's a metaphoric thing that allows me to believe I will be able to sense them differently in this way. So without being able to see them, I tuned into this personality, and the mother said, I know which daughter that was. And then I showed her exactly what the daughter was showing me, how she passed, and some of her passions in life absolutely fit that personality. Then suddenly I'm feeling a quite distinct personality over here where I had asked the other one to stand. It was so different. And she showed me how she passed. Very, very evidential. And Mom was just overjoyed to hear from both daughters. And then, just to make it easier on me, to make it easier to communicate during the reading, knowing my own current limitations with names, I knew that Mom knew these were her daughters, that she didn't need to be impressed by me getting their names. So I said, Mom, please tell me their names. I asked her to tell me, and she said, well, this one over here is so-and-so, and this one is that one. And can you now understand how much easier it is to say, well, Mary is saying this, and Jane is saying that. And it was so much easier than saying, well, the one who's really shy and the one who's really extroverted. So there are, again, benefits to getting outside the limited box we put ourselves in, and the rules that say it has to go a certain way. All righty. All right. So important to manage the energy when we connect with loved ones across the veil. Did a reading recently where my sitter was not real effusive in her feedback, and that's not always necessary, but I love it when my sitters are as excited as I am. I can't require people to be that way because some people, that's just their nature. And a lot of sitters will be going through grief, and it would be inauthentic to act excited. So this one mother had a child across the veil. I don't know if I knew that or not as I went into the reading, but as I sat down to do the reading, my guide Brenda showed up and she said to me, "Buckle your seatbelt, Suzanne." And I was like, oh goody, because that I knew she knew in advance this one was going to go so well and have good evidence. And so it really surprised me when we were getting good evidence, but Mom was just saying, well, yeah, that's right, And I thought, well, I don't know why I needed to buckle my seatbelt for this one, but I'm happy that it's going well. I knew that Mom could tell that her child was there. And I said, it was a son. I said, your son just showed me the symbol for tattoo, but he's pointing away. I said, it feels to me that your husband got a tattoo in his honor. And she said, no, not him. I got one. She said it just like that. And I said, okay, all right, I'm wrong about that, but he knows about the tattoo and it's you, all right. And then later I said, your son's showing me there's a poem, you may have written it. He's pointing at you. It's a poem that has to do with him. And she said, well, maybe. And I said, you check with the spirit first. Yeah, he's nodding. There's a poem. And I said, well, Mom, maybe it'll come to you later. So the reading went on. And right at the end, I still hadn't had a reason to buckle my seatbelt. We're wrapping it up. And in the son's words, suddenly this big outpouring of energy. I said, well, your son wants me to wrap this up by saying, Mom, you have that tattoo and it's on your arm, but I want you to know you carry me always in your heart. And Mom said, still not real effusively, but she said, well, yes, the tattoo is a poem. Remember the poem? The tattoo is a poem about him, and it says, I carry you always in my heart. Well, let me tell you, I jumped out of my chair because I didn't have my seatbelt on. I literally came out of the chair. I was just ecstatic because I could tell by this point, Mom, her low affect was because of her grief. And who can blame her, right? With the son across the veil. But I knew then that that one bit of evidence to quote what was on that tattoo would be something that she would remember forever. And when she got past the fog of grief, would remember that with joy. So it was just beautiful. And I hope that you're all celebrating with me how the spirit world pulls out all the stops to let us know that they're still with us. So speaking of Brenda, she comes through almost every time before I do a reading and before all of these mentoring sessions, because she's always present with those and tells me things going on in our friend Lynette's life. In fact, just before this session tonight, she gave me 2 pieces that were spot on. I always text Lynette, I'm getting ready to do a reading, and I'm texting her, Brenda's here and she says this or that. So if you follow my Facebook page, you may have noticed in about 2 or 3 weeks ago, all of a sudden one morning, Brenda gave me 4 things in a row. One was, she said, she pops in, I'm getting ready to do the reading. She says, Lynette just hung a painting on the wall. It's one she painted herself. So there's like 2 pieces right there. Then she says she is thinking about doing a painting of a photo she took of her dog last night. How's that for specific? Then she says she showed me Lynette shaving her knee around an incision. Lynette just had recently, over a month ago, knee surgery. And I could tell she had just shaved it for the first time. Writing all this down. And then the 4th one, Brenda showed me a banana, and I just knew it meant Lynette needed more potassium in her diet. Sent all of these off to Lynette, all 4 were spot on. She had just hung a painting she did herself the last night. She took a picture of her dog and was thinking, I think I'll paint the dog. She had just shaved around her knee for the first time since surgery and got blood test results that showed low potassium. Can there be any doubt that there is a greater reality? You are part of it. We're all pop-ups from the same source. Brenda, we call source joy. Brenda is joy as Brenda. You are joy as state your name. You're looking there at joy as Bev. I'm joy as Suzanne. And aren't we joy us? US. All of us, when we come to know that we're all connected, and that's what makes these pop-ups so miraculous and wonderful. You know, that's what takes us from limited nature to limitless. We're still quite limited as long as we're in these bodies, but the joy of that, that's why Source came in as you, for these moments of knowing. And knowing is the highest level in mediumship that all of you as mediums, I hope, will aspire to. If somebody shows you a banana, you just know that means low potassium. So I just saw a pop-up. I don't usually look at them. I let Bev do that. But somebody said, that's amazing. Was Brenda a medium too? Brenda had studied to be a medium. She was doing practice readings. She did not start working as a professional before she passed, just in 2018. But she always started telling people that she and I were going to be teaching mediumship together. And everybody was like, come on, Brenda, really? You're not even a medium yet. And you're claiming you're going to be teaching with Suzanne. And what is she doing? Teaching with me from across the veil. Why? Because life is not the end of, death is not the end of life. Life goes on. And Brenda was the eternal teacher. She was in education her whole career here and had no intention of giving it up when she crossed the veil. So that's so cool. And the thing that shows us, the way Brenda just pops up before a reading or in my meditation, is our guides and our loved ones are always and already here. What do we mean by that? Brenda's the one that showed me there's only here, because there's just one consciousness, one screen of awareness, and all of it is just continuously popping up as you and me and all that is and interacting, and joy's running the whole show. And so miracles happen all the time. Speaking of windows overlapping and knowing what's going on, because we share source, we are shared joy and expression. I spoke in last month's mentoring session about how couples form a couple field, how it is that you know what your partner is thinking or what they're about to do, because you create one window. You are your own separate windows, but you create a window. There are windows within windows, right? You just drag them around the screen. Well, we had a magical moment a couple weeks ago. Ty and I were sitting at the breakfast table in our RV. Ty's looking one way out the window. I'm looking the other way. We're eating our scrambled eggs. And all of a sudden, Ty said, oh, look. And he pointed completely behind me. He just said, oh, look. Now, we have just put 6,000 miles on our bus. We're in a different place every 3 days. Oh, look could mean anything. I didn't look. I looked at him and I said, oh, a hot air balloon. He went, his jaw dropped, and he said, how do you know that? And I turned around, and of course it was a hot air balloon. And I say, of course, because we are a field, a couple field. And that's how it works. It's a shared awareness. And the more you increase your sensitivity through periods of silence and building the power, these kinds of things of tapping into fields that you share with others all the time happens. It's how a mother knows what her child is up to, even when separated by miles. It's how you know what your loved one is doing across the veil, because you're still connected. That window's still there on the screen, even though they're not in a physical body anymore. So one mind, ultimately at the deepest level, one mind that differentiates itself into what appear to be individual minds, but it's just one. How cool is that? And then I realized, I said to him when he said, how do you know? I said, I'm reading your mind. And then I realized That is human verbiage. That's what we say, and it's not accurate. I'm not reading his mind. And I went like this, and we seem to think that, and I've even had a slide that showed a thought wave going from his mind to mine, or mine, or your, somebody's mind to another. It's actually Source's thoughts bubbling up. It's omnipresent, those thoughts. They arise from and within consciousness. We seem to think that the brain is the transmitter, but really thoughts arise on the screen of awareness. Different way of thinking about it, and that also allows us to be far less limited as to what we can perceive. So really good stuff. Thoughts are non-localized. They are not stuck in your head. When you're trying to retrieve a memory, you're not getting it from your brain. You're pulling it from source, from the field. Good stuff to think about, okay? How about a couple questions, Bev?
Okay. TJ asks, if someone has health issues and they need medication, is it harder to connect with guides or loved ones on the other side?
That's completely going to depend on the kind of medication and on your beliefs about how that medication will affect you. Belief is so important. If somebody tells you, now watch out, this is going to make you really foggy, it likely will. If somebody told you you can't do a reading if you're on this kind of medication, you might not even try. This question has come up in the past, and Mavis Patel, a great medium, I wrote her biography, Droplets of God. In the book, it states she's on 10 milligrams of morphine a day due to major trauma in her body over the years, and she still does wonderful readings. She just said, this is not going to affect me, and it doesn't. So first of all, even if you feel a little off balance, always try first and see how that goes. Okay, how about another one, Beth?
Thank you. Jeff asks, I've noticed that some channeled entities seem to speak in an accent or an otherwise otherworldly voice, while others just sound like their hosts. What's the difference, or why the difference?
Oh, there's the lip twitch. The guides know the channel, the channeler. And for example, Sanaya speaks with an accent, and they know me well. I would have just thought I was making it up if it was just my voice. They have said out loud in a channeling session, we give the accent so this one, the channeler, knows it is us. I know them by the feel, but that's the way I am. Now there are others, and I know a couple very famous ones whose voices don't change at all. And years ago, I would watch and I'd say, they're not channeling. They sound just like themselves. And so you can see my belief system. So my guides knew me very clearly. Those whose voices don't change, they know what they know. So listen to the content, feel it in your heart. Is it from a higher consciousness? That's what really matters. All right. All right. Thank you. We'll do more questions as we go along. All right. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit more about symbols and how those across the veil use them. I have such a library of symbols from things that come up about certain ways that people pass. I've talked about some of them this evening. And I realized that our symbols might actually limit us. They're a way of freeing us, but at the same time, I'll show you how they can limit us. I did a reading for a woman. She already told me in advance. She wanted me to know my husband passed by taking his own life. And as I tuned in during her reading, I immediately felt a man and I saw my suicide symbol. It was one that just arose when I first started doing readings. And I'm sorry to be graphic, but this is a lesson in how helpful symbols can be. I saw a sign of a symbol of a noose. And I said years ago, your loved one took his own life, and the client said yes. So from that day on, my guides would use that visual for a symbol of suicide, but it wasn't always by that method. So I would have to sense, first I would know that meant suicide, but if they wanted to give greater evidence and be specific, the spirit had to show that, okay? So in this recent reading, I saw that suicide symbol, but I didn't say this was death by hanging because I thought, what if that's just the generic symbol? But why is he showing me that if I already know that's how he passed? He showed it to me again, and I was not sure enough to say anything. I always hit myself over the head. When I don't say it, I tell everybody, say it. Well, at the end, I finally asked, would you mind telling me how he passed? And she said, he hung himself. He hanged himself. And I finished that reading. And what I recommend all mediums do is go to your guides to find out how you can do better when you're not happy with how a reading goes. So I connected with Brenda after the reading and I said, look, from now on, how about if I just know how they passed, that it's suicide? Then if they want to show me how, and it's important, they can show me that. And you saw recently that happened in that reading I told you about earlier. I just knew this man had taken his own life. Well, the very next reading, after asking Brenda as my guide to have the spirits let me just know how they passed and then be specific if they want to, I tuned in a reading. I felt a very masculine presence and was pulled in my system to where I feel a child. I said to the woman, I sense you have a son who passed. She said, yes, I do. She had not told me any of that. And I waited and I felt all the strength go out of me like a collapse. And I had a little bit of trouble breathing. And both of these came with the knowing this young man had passed from a drug overdose. I found this very interesting, that I had this new way of knowing how he passed, because in the past, when I would see this symbol, that was I took drugs. I passed from a drug overdose. Because the very first time I saw that and reported it, felt like the person passed from drugs. It was a drug overdose. I said to my guides, let that be the symbol. So the day after I had asked my guide, let's just get this knowingly and be specific if they want to, it wasn't about a suicide at all. It was about a drug overdose. And after I reported that, the young man showed me putting a needle in his arm. I'm sorry if this is heavy, but it's just shows you how those across the veil get things through to us so specifically to let us know they're okay. And I said, this, your son is showing me that he actually used injectable drugs and passed from heroin overdose. And she said, that's exactly what it was. So look at that. If I had just seen my normal symbol, we would have stopped at drug overdose, but instead her son was able to say, yes, Mom, you can believe this is me because of the specific evidence of how he passed. And I just found it so validating that those across the spirit world will work with us, but often we have to become aware of our own limitations. So I hope that's helpful to you. Now, I'm going to stay on this a little bit of heavy energy right now. I'm talking about it now because we're really going to lift it as the time goes on, but I want to share this with you because it gives us so much hope. Hopefully it does for you. Suicide is so challenging, and so many of my clients are dealing with a loved one who passed that way. Well, I was recently contacted by a woman who's been following my work for years, a dear friend now. She's been to many of my workshops. She already knows the spirit world is real, but her world was rocked in the last month. She allowed me to share this with all of you when she found out, and so challenging. Her daughter, the mother of 4 children and pregnant, hanged herself this past month. And she just couldn't believe it. Just had no idea that it would come, she would come to that. And she reached out to me. She said her greatest wish as a mother was simply to know if her daughter was okay. Now, I know from connecting with thousands of souls, everyone is okay when they cross the veil, no matter how they pass, no matter how good or how bad we might have judged a person. All are met with love. All are met with love. But her daughter, very good woman, but faced challenges. And so about 2 days later, now keep in mind, her sole wish was to know, was her daughter okay? I didn't sense anything at first. And that's not a surprise, because often those who take their own life go to a beautiful healing environment and are adjusting to this new environment. But this mom wrote to me, and I hope you love this as much as I do, how the spirit world works to comfort us. The mother went to YouTube on the computer. And if you've used YouTube, you know when you open it up, there is always a full screen of a whole bunch of random videos that you can choose from. Before you do any search, your screen is filled with choices of videos that YouTube, through some algorithm, somehow thinks you're going to be interested in. The very first video that randomly popped up on her screen was the account of a near-death experience by a mother of 4 who had passed, who had died and come back to tell about it when she was 12 years old, serving in a haunted house, and accidentally hanged herself on Halloween. Well, guess what? My friend's daughter's birthday is Halloween. And this mother of 4 who came back to tell about it, the message in that video was, in those moments when she crossed the veil after hanging accidentally, she was met with so much love, and the peace that consumed her is something that has stayed with her whole life here. Absolutely stunning. Doesn't take away the pain that the family is dealing with now, but wow, indeed. And I asked her, may I share this with everybody so they know how spirit, the limitless screen of consciousness, puts these experiences in our face for healing, for healing. Thought that was beautiful. So I did promise in the email I sent out, and by the way, let's all just take a moment, and it's this easy. We all know somebody who's challenged right now. Bring to mind someone you know who is dealing with a tremendous challenge, and it may even be you. And let's also, that's one window on the screen of consciousness. Let's bring up this mom that I just told the story about. And let's send healing to everybody, to those we mentioned and to all who need it. Let's just take a moment from your heart and do that. And know that that makes a difference. We're all healers in a way. Thank you for that. Speaking of near-death experiences, I promised you we'd talk about why near-death experiences differ. So many of them are very much the same. People see a light, some go through a tunnel, met by love, met by family members, but yet each one has its own different story, different scenario. Not all are pleasant, but almost all are. And it's because we are all aspects of consciousness having limited experiences as consciousness. And those unique experiences continue across the veil. So even though we share the depth of our being as pure being, we are each unique aspects of awareness itself, a unique point of view of consciousness. So those individuated, unique experiences continue across the veil. This is why Sanaya, my guides, came through this month and said, don't call it an afterlife. Life is continuous. Call it the ever life. I love that. You will be the exact same soul when you cross the veil. But the story is up to the soul, whether or not it continues. But still, you will re-embody the story, just like the guy Om with the Beatles, right? He re-embodied the story to interact with his wife, even though he had jumped to a higher level. So if you go to NDE, like Near Death Experience, RF, Research Foundation, nderf.org, that is the largest repository of near-death experiences online. And they have over 500,000 readers a month, spreading the messages of love that there is an ever life, okay? And Bev, if you put that URL on there, nderf.org, you can see it on the screen there. And our guides are always telling us, read something uplifting, read something that expands our awareness regularly. If you read one NDE account a day, imagine how your awareness would expand. Very cool. So we do create our own experiences here and across the veil. So those who expect to be met by Jesus, they come through in the readings and they tell me, I met the Lord. And I said, this tells me that your mother, who, if this is mom talking, would have loved Jesus and would have wanted to meet him because she's telling me this now, and they're just overjoyed to hear that. And then others that didn't have that belief will say, I was met by somebody different. Or others will go like this, and that was my symbol for my eyes are open. I didn't have any belief in an afterlife, and boy, was I wrong. I love seeing those. And that is very evidential when the loved one says, oh yeah, like my dad, they thought the big black curtain comes down and that's it. Well, surprise. It's glorious, glorious. All righty. Bev, how about a couple questions?
Okay. Jennifer asks, when we transition, will we understand the source of our illness? For instance, cancer patients. Is that part of our life review or guidance from our spirit guides to understand the source of that illness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see many times major illnesses like that is something that the soul agreed to take on for the challenges and for the opportunities that it offers for the soul's growth and the growth of those around us. And the whole life, what we've learned from life reviews and what mediums learn from speaking to spirits across the veil is shown in that review. And so pretty much all is known and understood, the big picture. So while we're here in these limited windows, these forms, these stories that we're acting out here, we can learn to shift our awareness to the soul level and ask to be shown here and now, what is the lesson in this? If I actually ask to take this on, what can I learn now and not have to wait until I cross the veil from this experience? Okay.
Okay. Catherine asked, her mother just recently passed, and she said, when I was with her in her last days, I want to know if my singing and chanting were helpful or were they an annoyance? If someone is non-responsive, what is the most helpful for their well-being as they start to transition?
I'm laughing only from joy because I've had so many souls across the veil comment on those loved ones that sang to them in their final days and how comforting that was. Why? Because the singing has an energy. It has the energy of the heart. And what is the motive with which those songs are sung? Healing and love. And even if I can't imagine, let me ask the team so I'm not just speaking off the top of my head. Oh no, the guides say as one is transitioning, it's the human side is left behind, and annoyance is one of those things that's left behind. It is a soothing balm is what I'm hearing. Beautiful. About one more, Bev.
Gwen asked, are different vortices or vortexes opening up around the country at this time of awakening?
I just asked the guides about vortices yesterday in meditation. Are they real? I know they are because with all the traveling we do, you can tell when you're in an area with heightened energy. And what I hear as this question is asked is that they are not opening up. It is we who are opening to the energy. How about that? Cool. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Bev. All right. Let's see. Moving on, I have all the notes of things Spirit shared with me. I promised to share with you a tool for instant alignment with our true self. You've noticed that several times tonight I call source what? Joy, right? This is not just human joy that has an opposite. This is the pure joy of awareness of being this, the ultimate, the absolute. It's a peaceful, but yet bursting with joy feeling. When we can get our stories out of the way, you feel this. It has to go somewhere. And that's why you and I are here. We are that joy bursting forth. And it bursts forth into material form as you. Doesn't mean you have to be joyful all the time. But what I was shown in meditation was engender a burst of joy. Feel it bursting forth, and you instantly align with the deeper aspects of yourself. So I asked my wonderful friend Karen Crawford, who's joining us this evening, to give me a drawing of what I was being shown in meditation, and she did a beautiful job. I told her how I was being shown. Hang on, we'll get this going. And here's what she came up with. I love it. This spiral, an eddy within the ocean of consciousness, and we're all these shining stars, these lights. Just look at the glittering tail there. We burst forth from the sea of all that is as a soul for the experience of being something other than just pure being. We come here to shine our light. So even if you're not feeling particularly joyous, you can just imagine what it might feel like to burst forth. That will just raise your vibration enough that you can then connect a little more with awareness of your true nature. The best time that I have found to use this is during a reading. So mediums, pay attention. And those of you trying to connect with your loved ones, if you've dropped the link or you don't really sense the presence as strongly or clearly as you'd like, just think of something that brings you great joy and just feel it. Just picture this image right here that you're seeing and feel it bursting forth from your heart. I find the link comes right back. I tried this and Brenda was right in my awareness. She's always here, but that burst of joy brought her into this limited field of awareness. Where did that burst of joy come from? The limitless field of awareness. And when I say, I hope you like that. I love the picture. Thank you, Karen. When I say that we're like these shining stars and they're always here, think about it. When it's daylight, are the stars in the sky? They are. They're right there, but we can't see it because the light is so bright. We think the stars come out at night. There are even songs, and the stars came out at night. They didn't, they're already there. But we have to, there's a little darkness that comes and then you can see the light. When do our guides and angels come to us? In our greatest moments of darkness. There are these bursts of joy. So I hope that visual helps you. Just a little tool. I love these tools that help us align with who we are. All right. So let me see. That takes me to another note about doing readings. My guides recently said, yes, it's wonderful to have a motive of serving and helping others, of healing others when doing readings. But may your first motive be to let your own light shine. And they're not talking about to look wonderful and do great as a medium. They're talking about enjoying the process. If you're doing readings and you're not enjoying it, perhaps you shouldn't be doing them. We come here as source for the experience. They're not all joyous, but this work of service is and can be a joyous endeavor. It reminded me of a quote by Viktor Frankl, whose wonderful book, what's the name of the book? Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust victim. A wonderful book. And in it, he said, do not aim for success. For in so doing, if you aim for success, you will miss the mark. Aim only to serve a purpose greater than the self, and success will ensue. So I love that. When we do readings for a greater purpose than ourselves, without worrying about success or failure, success naturally ensues. And what Source, what Joy was saying with this new teaching is, don't even aim to serve, just aim to be joy in expression, who you are. In other words, shine your light. Go at this and say, I can't wait to see what is going to arise in this reading. I can't wait to see what healing, what connection is going to take place, and the connection will take place. How about that? So bursts of joy. Love it. All righty. Going to move on here. Time is passing so quickly. I, last month in the mentoring, mentioned how I did a reading for a woman. I shared this in the story of the woman who had suffered horrendous sexual abuse as a child, and how my spirit animal, the panther, came through in that reading to let us know we're safe in that reading. And I mentioned last month that the guides in that reading showed her a powerful exercise to heal the trauma of that abuse. And several people said, what was it? What was the tool? But we didn't have time last month, so I promised to share it with you this month. And I got Mary's permission to share the story with you. Mary's story is so powerful, she's actually going to be on my radio show. Lynette, I know you're watching. She's my radio show assistant. Lynette, if you can find out when Mary's going to be on, we can announce it and people can make a note of it. We're several months out. Lynette can type the note in here. But anyway, with Mary's permission, I share with you that the guides in her reading showed me arcs like a Rayovac battery, the commercial where you see like the little lightning bolts coming off of her. These were little discharges of energy that needed to be released that were in her field. So she was still very reactive, very uncomfortable, still struggling. After many, many years of those who had abused her had passed, yet she still had this unresolved energy. And they showed us that it was like a boiling pot that has steam, that just a little bit, you lift the lid and a little bit gets off, but it's still boiling underneath. Some of you may relate to this. You still feel the tension. You still feel the wounds. Okay. I want to give a shout out to my new friend in Scotland. I know you'll relate to this. I asked her to join us tonight for the healing. Okay, so what the guides showed was the way that Mary was to heal herself was to know that she was divinely protected and surrounded by angels, but to set a time to have it out with the loved ones who showed up in that reading, her father and her uncle. If you were with me last month, both men who had abused her came in accompanied by guides, escorted, so that she would know that they were kind of protecting her and that they were surrounded by love, but still learning across the veil and seeing the results of their actions. It was quite interesting. But she was told to, now that she knew from the evidence in the reading, they are still sentient beings and they had asked for her forgiveness, that she could rant and rave and curse at them, yell at them, say everything she wanted to say at them, cry, whatever it took, get it out, knowing they would be there receiving that. And I said, you're really supposed to do this. Well, Mary was very wise. She knew that this would be a very emotional task. So she actually called on a friend of hers who is a healer and had been helping her with some therapy. And she had her on Zoom, on a computer, in the room where she decided to do this in her house. She chose a tall lamp to stand for her father. She chose a shorter lamp to stand for her uncle. And she went at it. She lit into them. She wrote to me exactly what she said, and man, she cursed up a storm at them. She was crying, screaming, and she could feel their presence and feel them hearing her. She said the therapeutic feeling from doing that and knowing she was heard, was so healing. She could feel the energy finally releasing itself. She said it felt so good, very impactful. But then I'm going to read her words here. She says, when all my pent-up rage was finally discharged, I felt it. Can you tell the difference between just raging in general? How could they do this to me? And feeling the victim, but knowing you've been set up to talk with them, to have it out, and they're asking for forgiveness. She said, I felt it discharge. That's when all the wonderful feelings welled up inside me. And this is huge. Whew, I got goosebumps. I never felt so much love, compassion, empathy, and understanding toward these two men in my life. That is an unexpected outcome, isn't it? She's asking for healing for herself, and yet she's finding compassion and understanding for their woundedness. She wrote, miraculously, the process I did with my dad and uncle also freed me from all resentments I've had against somebody else in my life for more than 30 years, and my mother. It's amazing how healing the evils these two men had done cleared the decks regarding my mother and this other person, and enabled healing these other relationships. She said again, please feel free to share as much of this as you wish with anyone. It will help others find hope and know that they too can recover from abuse of all sorts, even as horrendous as mine, and it was horrendous. She said, imagine this, after 30 years of suffering, it's a magical, glorious ride. I'm so grateful I'm on it. I look forward to what lies ahead. Amazingly, she's dropping weight like crazy. She just wrote to me, she's dropped several clothing sizes. She's no longer protecting herself against anything or eating out of pain or shame. And just understand that the guidance for this technique came from the higher levels, knowing exactly what heals. It was just beautiful, beautiful. She is absolutely free. I've heard from her, and the transformation after just one tool from the guides is phenomenal. And I pray that anybody listening here that feels that that might help you will try it, but always do so safely. It was very, very interesting and very wise of her to have someone with her while she did that process. Just know that we're always safe when we ask our guides and angels to be with us. They're always around anyway. So beautiful, beautiful. Healing can take place even across the veil. Bev, how about a couple questions, and then we're going to get into the two final teachings, actually some of the biggest ones that I announced in the email about this evening.
Okay. I'm combining Jacqueline's question and Julie's. Jacqueline asks if the spirit realms have confirmed that there is reincarnation. And Julie's, actually her son wants to know, do we always have to reincarnate as a human being, or can we incarnate as another entity?
Okay, absolutely, there is reincarnation. Those across the veil have told us that. And if you want to be very earthly, read the research of Dr. Ian Stevenson. Thousands upon thousands of stories that validate children who remember past lives. They have scars and wounds on their body that are the same as the way a past life experience ended. I simply have no doubt that it's real. I've been told by my guides that because the soul comes here to evolve, that trajectory of that energy field will continue as a human until it no longer needs the human experience, ever onward, ever upward. But because it's all source, think about it. If we dissolve back into the sea of consciousness, this limitless potential, source can arise as anything. We like to put it in a nice, neat little box and say, this human cannot become that. But what is this human? Source energy, consciousness. So truly any experience is available to any aspect of this pure being. Okay, it gets kind of deep, but we limit ourselves so much by needing to make everything nice and neat. I know I usually do. All right, let's see. Okay, so hang on. I promised you all that in fact, the email subject line was, do you want to be heard? And what I meant by that is when we speak, do we want people to pay attention, not push us away, right? Or immediately say their side of the story. And it's such a simple tool, and here it is. Be aware of what you're radiating, what energy you are giving off when you interact with another person, and what level you're radiating energy from. So are you radiating openness and love, or are you radiating anger or any forceful energy that would cause pushback? Force is always met with force. Love is simply pure being. There is nothing to push back against. And are you radiating from within the limited human story, or are you shifting your point of view, being aware you are a soul, and I am going to talk to this person soul to soul, heart to heart, even if they don't know they're a soul. I see you, I'm going to talk to the soul. This is huge. If only people in our world right now understood this. We see it in the headlines, we see it in politics, force against force. No one will listen to each other. No one is hearing each other. What if we come from a place of love, from a soul, don't need to be heard? No, the soul will absorb the love and hear this. I'm going to give you one short example from my life recently, and then I'm going to share with you a beautiful example. Bev, would you please find in the list Jacob Cooper and make him a participant? Don't bring him in till I'm ready, but you can make him a participant, okay?
Okay.
All right. So I was sitting in my RV with some friends out in Colorado. Ty and I were sitting just chatting. Oh, by the way, we were having a glass of wine. I just realized as I've been sipping on this, it's in a beer mug. It's cranberry juice and water, everybody. It looks like it's either rosé wine or a beer. Gail gave me this lovely cranberry juice, but I was having a glass of wine at the time this story unfolded. And I looked out the front windshield of the bus at a campsite, the next one over. And there's this little kid, like 4 years old, all by himself outside his trailer. And two big dogs, a yellow lab and a black lab, tied up outside the trailer. And the kid had a fly swatter in his hand. And he went over and went whack right on the dog. And I went like this. And then he stopped, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to say anything, because then he wandered off. And I thought, that's not right. But we'll just let it lie for now. We went back to talking. 3 minutes later, now the kid comes up and goes, whack. I mean, we're not just swatting, whack, both dogs. And I was up. I said, I'll be back in a minute. And they said, what? I said, that kid over there is smacking his dogs, and that is not right. And I started marching out of the bus, and I went into full commander mode. Most of you know I was a retired Navy commander, and I am marching across. And because that role is so different from how I know, who I know we are now, the soul, I just went, whoa, whoa. I became aware, and I know the difference love makes. So I slowed down, shifted to soul awareness, and walked up. And I said, little boy, is anybody home in here? Are your parents home? And he said, yeah. And I said, could you get him? And he said, yeah. And he pounds on the door. He was adorable, really, adorable little boy. And I didn't know what I was going to say, but I turned it over to spirit. That's called channeling, right? And out comes Dad. I went into namaste pose, opened my heart, and I looked at him with a smile. And I said, hi, I'm the last person in the world to tell any parent how to parent their child. And I said this with this next part with no sarcasm. I totally meant it. I said, you're a beautiful little boy, because that could be heard the wrong way, right? But I said, your beautiful little boy is out here whacking on the dogs really hard with the fly swatter. And I just said it like that. Now you can imagine how that would have went if I went up like the commander, how that would have gone if I had gone up to him as a commander, can't you? Because we've all probably been there. Human story, meeting human story. Do you know your son is out here hitting the dogs? What would Dad have done? Boom. Who the heck are you to tell me how to treat my son? Get in here, boy. Instead, Dad heard that. He cocked his head with this funny little smile, looked down at his son with the sweetest expression on his face, and he went like this. Busted. That was it. And then he took his son by the hand and gave him a nice little talk about how you treat dogs nicely. And I said, thank you so much. And I went back, and that was it. It just dissolved. And I have found so much joy in trying that. Try it with your partner. It's amazing. See them soul to soul when tempers rise. Catch yourself and say, what's going to happen if I just open up and do this from the heart, soul to soul? There's nothing for them to push back against. It dissolves. So now, Bev, could you bring in Jake Cooper, please?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob is a licensed clinical social worker who has just written a book, and it's not published yet. The book is called Life After Breath. Jacob, if you have a camera, you're going to want to turn it on because I can't see you, and we want everybody to see you.
I don't know why Jacob is showing up as you, Suzanne.
No, it says Jacob Cooper here for me.
Oh, it does? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I don't see a camera. He may not have a camera. Well, anyway, Jacob is listening, so I want to honor him by saying that he sent his manuscript to me asking for me to write an endorsement of it because he had a near-death experience as a very young child, and his whole life has unfolded beautifully and differently as a result of that near-death experience. And I already knew I was going to tell all of you this story about how things change when we come from the heart. And right near the end of this book, I read this passage that was so beautiful, and I thought, I don't want all the stories to be about me. And I asked Jacob, may I share this passage from your book? And he said yes. So with his permission, I'll paraphrase the first part, but he tells the story about going to synagogue with his parents. He glances to the pew next to his, and there sits the principal from his school that he remembered from his school days. And this principal was not the most likable guy, was not very nice. Earlier in the book, he told some stories about him, and there he is. But now Jacob is evolving. He knows that we're souls. And he turned to the principal and said, I don't know if you remember me. He extended his hand and said, but I'm Jake Cooper. Let me read this now. In that moment, with my mind and heart open to the man next to me, I felt my whole body becoming light, euphoric, and at peace. Once I connected to this light, I couldn't help grinning. I love this. Now, this part is something else. My former principal, however, was not impressed by my kindness. He looked at me with raised eyebrows, his mouth in a tight line. Wait till you feel this energy. Oh, stop sucking up to me, he snapped snidely. I'm not grading your paper. Ooh. Now see, Jake came at him with an open heart, so we're not always instantly going to change things. Now, if somebody said that to you, how would you react? But knowing what we know as souls and why we're here to let our light shine, Jacob knew this from his near-death experience. He writes, I blinked, a little caught off guard. Then I tapped into my heart and recognized the root issue of why people judge. When I chose to be light, that was what I saw in others. The world was merely a reflection and trick of the mind for really what was inside. In that moment, I saw the man's contemptuous remarks as a cloak to hide a very insecure, hurt, and broken person. Hurt people, right? You know, I added, you were a good principal. I know you've had an impact on countless students. Now it was his turn to be thrown off by my response. He began to mutter, not meeting my eyes. I repeated my words, this time from a deeper place. He said, no one thinks that of me. I stared back at him and smiled, and he started tearing up. I recognized right then and there that if everyone chose to look closely, we could see beauty in nearly everything. After all, we all have a divine spark. Most importantly, it started with our connection as a mirror to the world. I learned to look at others through the God lens, to see the depths of a soul rather than through the surface. Thank you, Jacob, for saying that so beautifully, for demonstrating exactly the point here. When we want to be heard, speak from the soul. Speak from the soul. Give people nothing to push back against. Just be that which you are. Pure openness, pure love. That's our true nature. It's beautiful, isn't it? Jake's book, Life After Breath, not available yet, but as soon as it comes out, I'm getting him on my radio show too, and we'll let you know when the book is available. So just beautiful. And Jacob had a rough life, grew up with a lot of insecurities and never felt good enough. I know a lot of us can identify with that. And because of knowing who he is through that near-death experience, he has allowed his light to shine and helping others to find that within themselves. That's our goal, right? All righty. Let's see, Bev, we have some time. We'll do a whole bunch of questions because I've gotten through most of the teaching. Oh, before we move on to questions, I do want to tell you what I've been sharing with you tonight. A lot of these are tools that I have shared in the past in a workshop of mine called Awakened Living. Awakened Living. And in that workshop, I show people how to judge where you are on the path of awakening, what awakening is about, the tricks that the ego plays, how to understand other people and where their level of soul's evolution, how it causes them to behave. Awakened Living is a really wonderful 2 to 3 hour workshop. And my guides just inspired me to offer that free online. We've scheduled September 26th, Saturday at 1 o'clock. We're announcing it here for the first time because there is limited participation. There is a little but here. The guides always love when we make it a win-win situation. This is going to be a charity event, and it will ultimately be available to everyone after the event, free online. But if you want to join me live for this Love Fest in person, we're asking for a donation, and 100% of the proceeds, all donations, will go to the Always and Forever Animal Shelter, the Midwest Animal Shelter that I've written about in the past. I just got to visit it with Ty and some friends last week, and the love, unconditional love in that place, it is heaven on earth, a hospice for old sick dogs that nobody wants. They have so many dogs and cats now adopted, and it's all about the love. And we're the ones that benefit from their love, the animals' love. Their vet bills are $60,000 a month, and it's just run by volunteers and the one woman who had a vision, Jen Dulski. So Bev put the URL there. If you want to attend that workshop, we just ask for a minimum donation of $10, but ask you to do even more than that if you can, knowing what a difference it'll make. And if you can't afford anything at all, we will be putting the whole workshop online afterwards as a free video on YouTube. Awaken Living is the workshop. You can find out about it at the URL that Bev put on the screen there. You want to pop it up there again, Bev?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And if you would like to be part of a group of kindred spirits meeting regularly online, if you don't have anybody in your area and you just love this kind of talk and you want to talk with others, perhaps you want to develop your ability to connect across the veil, we have helped people form development circles. Bev and I are not part of those circles, but we connect people, and then you guys take the ball and run with it. Bev, do you have anything to say about that, or we have any new groups forming now?
We have a couple lists started, so as soon as we get 10 or so people, we'll form a new group. And we do this by time zone to keep it convenient. So people just need to email me with their name and their time zone. And I'll put my email here, and I'll put it also in the email that goes out with the recording. So let us know, and we'll put you together by time zone.
Bev gets all the credit for this. She does all the work and hooks people up. And then the leaders of the group, we have how many groups now? 12 or 14?
At least
we don't have them.
That are active. Yeah, there's, you know, they tend to be maybe 6 months or a year, and they don't last forever. Although we have, I think, a couple that have started in 2017 and are still going. So it depends on the group.
The bond that they form is beautiful, and it's just a beautiful way of staying immersed in this energy and remembering who we are. So yay. How about a few questions, Bev, and then we'll close with a couple more words.
Hey, all righty. Julie asks, how do we recognize each other as souls on the other side if we don't have our stories?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, let's go back to the basic teaching. We are joy in expression. So joy knows, and joy knows itself as you and you and you and you, who is really just joy in expression. So it's an innate recognition, and all aspects of consciousness, joy, spirit, source across the veil recognize the particular pattern of energy, the vibration. So it's like I've been told in the past, we each have our own ringtone, right? And so hopefully yours is a nice, sweet song and not bad to the bone, like this one girl said her phone's ringtone was. But we recognize each other by the light and because we have the shared essence. Okay. How about another one, Bev?
Okay. Could Sanaya speak about co-creation? This is Melissa, and I'll combine it with another question that asks, are our lives based on a plan that our soul had, or is it all law of attraction?
Okay, that is definitely mixing questions there.
Okay.
We are co-creators because we have this same source, which is this field of infinite potential. I'm tuning in now so I don't just rattle off randomly. This creation itself arises from the urge to bubble up and become something other than pure being. And so each creation carries that seed of wanting to create. Ripples within ripples. And so we are given the ability to make choices, and that's called free will. And so we make choices and we evolve through those choices, and the choices allow us to create new experiences. But understand, all experiences belong to, arise from, one indivisible being, source. So in a way, we are co-creating, But what is happening is it is a finite aspect of the infinite intelligence that is playing, experiencing, experimenting. Let's see what happens if this choice is made. Okay, quite interesting. What was the second part of that? Because it was a little different.
Oh, okay. Are our lives here on Earth created based on our soul plan, or is it all law of attraction?
There's absolutely a soul's plan. There's a script that we act out here with major milestones and major issues we're going to work on, but free will is the wild card, and that's what allows for evolution. Okay. I saw a pop up there. Somebody asked, remind us how to join the development circle. We send an email to Bev, right, Bev?
Yes, and I put my email there. Very easy. My name, bevgarlup@gmail.com. And give me your name, your email address, and your time zone.
And somebody else asked, what time was that Awaken Living workshop? Saturday, September 26th at 1 o'clock. I'm trying to accommodate our friends in Europe so that they don't have to get up in the middle of the night. And I'm so sorry for our friends in Australia and New Zealand, but yeah, it's hard to accommodate everyone in this global age. I'll do one more question, then I have just some final little things to share from the guides.
Okay. Wendy asks, how does the space of lucid dreams relate to the space we enter when we connect to loved ones on the other side?
Okay. The guides are saying, do not think in terms of space, think in terms of states of awareness. So lucid dreaming, lucid means greater awareness of the malleability of consciousness. So not lucid dreaming is not so caught up in the story, freer ability to create the current experience, to manipulate it with instant results. And so the guides are saying this state of awareness is very much like that which you will encounter when you have left the physical body, for you will instantly create and manipulate your experiences with the thoughts. Okay, very cool. Thank you. All right, so this is a final thing to wrap up here this evening. That talking about speaking to each other soul to soul and how that engenders a better interaction with those you're talking to. Remember, they don't have to know you're talking to their soul, but the soul knows it. And the soul is the place from which thoughts and actions arise. So if you're talking to someone who is even mildly alert to the thoughts that arise, a different thought will come up from the soul level because you approach the soul directly. All right. So there was a post, a message from my guides in the Daily Way this past month that spoke about what happens when you have a loved one or a friend who won't speak to you at all. Some of us have family members that haven't spoken to us in years, and it can be very, very painful and challenging at the human level. The soul is always fine. The souls of each of you are already interacting. So the message was, speak to them soul to soul and know that they hear you. I'm repeating this again because there were a couple comments where I posted that message on Facebook of somebody saying, I'd never thought of that. It never occurred to me. So we have a very close family member who hasn't spoken to us in years, and I speak to them frequently at the soul level. Have they reached out to us yet? No. But knowing that the communication is taking place and able to send love allows some of that steam to let off, right? So just assure them, I know there's a lesson in this for all of us, sending your human story, lots of love. Perhaps you can really try to get some of that love through to them, because I know that's what they need more than anything, or the communication would be happening. So just become aware, we're not stuck in the story. You get to choose. And that's a beautiful, freeing thing. And then one final tool, I've shared this in a workshop, but I haven't shared it in years, so I want to make sure that all of you hear it. When you want to co-create a new experience and things aren't working, sometimes it's because it's not meant to happen. But if you want to just try a different tactic, know that we all have guides. As long as we're acting out these stories, we don't do it alone. We have spirit guides. Brenda helps me with mediumship, but I have other guides, my main spirit guide, and so do you. So knowing that others with whom you're interacting also have guides, have your guides talk to their guides and say, look, I've been trying to get through to this person. I'm doing it from my heart. My motive is pure. Their soul's not getting through to them. Maybe at the guide level, you can influence their consciousness. Be sure that you're not manipulating. That won't work at all. Make sure your motive is to affect the greatest good and that it comes from a place of love and wanting healing to take place. We've had amazing results from using this technique. My greatest story of this was when I shared it in a workshop, and a woman emailed me later that week. She said, Suzanne, when I heard that advice, just this past week, my daughter said to me, Mom, I've had it with you. I don't want to talk to you anymore. We're done. And I've been miserable ever since. She won't talk to me. I didn't know what to do. So I went home from the workshop and I sat and I got quiet and I said, all right, if I really do have a spirit guide, please talk to my daughter's spirit guide and ask her to reconcile with me. She said, Suzanne, my daughter just called me and said, Mom, I think we need to reconcile. You and I know where that came from. It's because we are part of something so much more than this story. When the human life gets you down, when the world gets you down, remember, this world is not the only world. We have helpers, we have guides. Our own souls are not stuck in the body or the story. Use these tools, play, experiment, make new choices, but most of all, just remember, you're here to let your light shine, come from a place of love, and watch how it changes your world. The world will mirror back to you what you shine on the world. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want to thank Bev for her beautiful help and thank all of you for the love that's just been radiating through the screen here this evening. I love it so much. I love that feeling, and my hope is that we all go out and just spew it all over everyone. All right, I love you. Thank you for joining me, and hope to see you on the 26th and maybe next month. Take care. Thanks, Bev.